Some of the things he said to me that I remember was, you know, it's always good to act crazy first, because later you can appear normal.
Hunter was made for the 60s and the early 70s.
He was capable of a verbal menace that I've seen him reduce people to mist in seconds.
You never had a dull conversation with Hunter.
He was a complete individualist.
His writing gave pleasure to a lot of people and at the same time upset a lot of people.
Yeah, Hunter was a deeply serious and kind of deeply moral person, you know, who liked orgies.
Hunter, in his heart and at home and with his friends privately, was a supreme Southern gentleman.
He said, I'd feel real trapped in this life right now if I didn't know that I could commit suicide at any moment.
Hunter Thompson, whom I would nominate as this century's greatest comic writer in the English language.
In the labyrinth that American culture became in the 1960s and 70s, Hunter S. Thompson just might have been at the center. And in a way, that center still holds. Straddling the worlds of journalism and literature, politics and rock and roll, sports and film, Thompson found himself at the intersection of some interesting times. But interesting times are the oldest of curses, and mazes have monsters in them too. Eventually, the permanent address for the good doctor became Owl Farm at Woody Creek, Colorado, a literary salon and a firing range, and a home base for his family, his first wife Sandy and their son Juan. But perhaps what Hunter Thompson liked to call the Proud Highway really started to open up for him when they ran him out of his own hometown. He was born in Louisville, Kentucky on July 18, 1937, the first son of Virginia Ray and Jack Robert Thompson, and was later joined by brothers Davison and Jim. The Athenaeum Literary Society gave Hunter his first readers, but he was already envisioning an audience on a much larger scale. So when officially invited to do so, he left Louisville at the age of 17 with a wild ambition, a fierce discipline, and the absolute conviction that he could write his way forward from there.
The core of the guy, you know, was when he'd say something and then you'd watch him laughing about it to himself and see the irony of his own words at times, and and you could see, a sweet kid from Kentucky.
There was this sort of, mutual kind of comprehension of what it means to hail from the dark and bloody ground, and that was the term we used. We always called it the dark and bloody ground.
He came from a solidly middle class as opposed to an upper class background. His dad passed away before I met Hunter, and I think that obviously had a big influence on Hunter's upbringing in his adolescence.
Hunter didn't have the discipline in his life growing up that others had, perhaps because his father left him early. This manifested itself in not liking authority.
What I learned from Hemingway, mainly. I think Hemingway, the best lesson from him. I had quarrels with some of his prose or writing, here and there. But what he taught me was that you can want to be a writer and get away with it.
He chose, rather than writing original copy, to retype books like The Great Gatsby, and a lot of Norman Mailer, The Naked and the Dead, a lot of Hemingway. He would sit down on an old typewriter and type every word of those books. He said, I just want to feel what it feels like to write that well.
If you type out somebody's work, you learn a lot about it. Basically, it's music, I think.
Yeah.
And, from typing out parts of Faulkner, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. I mean, these were just, these were writers that were very big in my life and the lives of the people around me. So yeah, I wanted to learn from the best, I guess.
This essay appeared in the Athenaeum Spectator, 1955.
The title of the essay is Open Letter to the Youth of Our Nation. Young people of America, awake from your slumber of indolence and hearken to the call of the future. Do you realize you're rapidly becoming a doomed generation?
Do you realize that the fate of the world and of generations to come rests on your shoulders?
Oh, ignorant youth, the world is not a joyous place. The time has come for you to dispense with the frivolous pleasures of childhood and get down to honest toil until you are 65.
Then and only then can you relax and collect your Social Security and live happily until the time of your death.
Signed, fearfully and disgustingly yours, John J. Righteous Hypocrite. His interaction with society moved from play, experimentation, to antagonism, to aggression. What began to be pranks turned into vandalism, and what used to be handled between parents began to involve the police.
Well, the first real watershed, I think, in Hunter's life was when he was picked up and put in jail.
A juvenile judge gave him the option of going to reform school or going into the military. Hunter selected the military, went into the Air Force, started writing for a base newspaper, and began his journalism career.
I was a juvenile delinquent. I was the Billy the Kid of Louisville.
Growing up in Kentucky, living in the panhandle of Florida, moving to Pennsylvania, then to upstate New York, and New York City, then to Puerto Rico, then living in Bolivia and Brazil and Venezuela, and traveling all over South America, then coming back and living in Big Sur, and then living in Glen Ellen, California, and then going down to Los Angeles all the time, then coming out to Woody Creek. That's about as peripatetic as you can get.
I was evicted from, fired from every job I had. And then evicted from every place I lived. So eventually, I guess in '72, I moved to Colorado. I finally had to buy the place because I couldn't move anymore.
I had witnessed the start. I was sure of that much. But what now? What comes next?
He worked out of his home base in Woody Creek for 30 or some years. He traveled often, for stories, but he always knew he had a place to come back to.
It was a beautiful rural location where Hunter could get away with a lot of stuff you can't get away with downtown, like target practice, blowing up dynamite, blowing up cars. Hunter got a big rush out of putting a half a case of DuPont dynamite, 25 pounds of black powder, 5 gallons of gasoline inside an old Jeep Cherokee and blowing it 300 feet in the air. You can't do that across the street here.
His first wife, Sandy, did a wonderful job of raising their son and keeping the bills paid and keeping the fire going while Hunter was running around and earning their living.
People were constantly trying to have an audience with him, and Hunter would invite people up. And at any given moment in his kitchen, which was just like a salon, you could have a poet and an actor and a CEO of a company and a state senator. And Hunter liked mixing people up like that.
Everybody made a pilgrimage to see Hunter Thompson at Owl Farm. He was like the Dalai Lama of writers.
He sat in the same chair always by his typewriter. Not a particularly comfortable stool by the typewriter in the kitchen.
You could even arrest that damn camera on that telephone.
No, this is good. I got the good
I know you're into this, you're getting it out. But tell me when you get tired with this.
No.
I'm getting tired watching you after listening to it.
He never liked to be alone. He always had to be surrounded with people, and a dialogue would ensue.
Now, if anybody wants to talk about any subject, I'm here. We have a question. Genius around the world stands hand in hand, and one shock of recognition runs the whole circle round. Hee-haw, is that good?
John Cusack told me he went over there one time, and he was expecting Dr. Hunter S. Thompson of lore, and there was nothing going on. There was no booze out. And he said,
You know, what's going on? I was expecting. He says, well, son, on the weekend there will be games.
He said, do you drink? Do you shoot? And I said, yeah, sure. He goes, well, I've got some things to attend to, hideous rape case, affidavit I've got to, but do you golf? Sure. So he put me out and gave me some whiskey, a shotgun, and he had on his porch a game called Shotgun Golf where he had, back where the monument is now, he had a little, green he had set up, and you'd take a bucket of balls and you'd hit the ball out, and if you could blow the golf ball out of the sky, then, that was fair. So it was kind of a pitch and putt with shotguns.
He always had his home base in Woody Creek. Any time in his life, whether he was traveling or not, he always had a sense of a home base.
The word is Gonzo. It helped push Hunter Thompson into prominence, and it dogged him to the very end. He created a character, an attitude, a voice, and arguably a genre to deploy it, an audience to enjoy it, and an entire era to go along with it. At a pivotal moment in the American experience, he minted sentence after sentence that were more furious, funny, and just plain fast than anything else you could get. Many of us discovered him in Rolling Stone magazine, where Thompson formed a fruitful but combative relationship with editor Jan Winter. But the real birth of Gonzo came in the spring of 1970. To find his working method rendered whole, Thompson would have to return to Louisville and make the acquaintance of a seemingly buttoned-down Welsh illustrator named Ralph Steadman. The piece was called "The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved."
Thompson went to the Kentucky Derby and he changed sports journalism and broadcasting forever.
Or not, they're walking in the shoes of his influence in this culture.
So he opened the gates of journalism to a flock of mad.
Most people can't handle the action on whatever they choose or have to call their own turf. And the few who can usually have better sense than to push their luck any further. That was always the difference between Muhammad Ali and the rest of us. He came, he saw, and if he didn't entirely conquer, he came as close as anybody we are likely to see in the lifetime of this doomed generation. Nice piece.
I think he was kind of a beacon for dissent, throughout his whole life. He was a place people could turn to get a moral argument from a immoral outlaw.
I was a good criminal at one point, and probably still am in some ways.
I said he was a fascinating sociological phenomenon, in part because of his capacity to attract so considerable a following.
Obviously, one of the things I have to appreciate about America, if I didn't, I'd be stupid or insane, is that for good or ill, I can function here.
He was an old-fashioned anarchist. He did not believe in institutions, did not believe in, and that meant he didn't believe in even the institutions of the counterculture.
I don't think that there are many societies or political systems where I could function the way I am now. And perhaps a lot of people would think it's much better. That's the best argument for destroying the system. It gets rid of people like me.
George McGovern and Hunter, are linked throughout history by Hunter's, not only his work, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, but their friendship over the years.
He was always interested in the concept of evil and wickedness, and he frequently saw it in high places that other people had learned to live with.
Richard Nixon represents the dark side of the American dream. Richard Nixon stands to me for everything that I would not want to have happen to myself or be around. He stands for everything that I not only have contempt for, but dislike and think should be stomped out.
For years, I've regarded Nixon's very existence as a monument to all the rancid genes and broken chromosomes that corrupt the possibilities of the American dream. He was a foul, caricature of himself, a man with no soul, no inner convictions, with the integrity of a hyena and the style of a poisoned toad.
Tonight, I again proudly accept that nomination for President of the United States.
I couldn't imagine him laughing at anything except maybe a paraplegic who wanted to vote Democratic but couldn't quite reach the lever on the voting machine.
But I have news for you. This time there's a difference. This time we're going to win.
That's as mean as you can get.
He was a villain all my life. He was a villain before he ran against Kennedy, or Kennedy chose to run against him in the 60s, in 60. And the more I knew him, the more I was around him, the more I covered him, the more of a villain he was. He was a twisted beast of a man.
Well, there's no question that Hunter shook up the establishment, including the establishment of journalism and political reporting. And he deliberately did that. He thought they needed to be shaken up.
The original Vegas, if you get the old Rolling Stone, says by Raoul Duke, because Hunter was afraid he'd get fired for writing that kind of subversive, drug-induced, hallucinogenic, crazy Gonzo prose.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail was always mystified me because it wasn't about the campaign, it was about Hunter.
When Hunter's book came out on the campaign, Frank Mankiewicz said it is the most accurate and least factual book about the campaign.
Politicians were hateful creatures that needed put in their place, looking for somebody, a shining light, Jimmy Carter, or in 72, George McGovern.
Hunter had a rare and original insight into the underlying forces that were operating in that campaign.
Human times are what they are, and the need for a poet to kind of name the times is always there. But it's such a rare gift when one comes along that you actually do sort of look, down the highway and you see Hunter Thompson.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of cold-blooded quality in those people, which I can recognize and deal with in other people, but I don't think I have it myself. Well, maybe I do. Maybe that's why I can connect with it.
Yet this man is an ex-Hells Angel, whose work is marked by a celebration of violence, drug-taking, and personal risk.
Are you trying to instigate a problem or something?
No, I just
if
wonder
you are,
why.
I'd ask you
Obviously, I have a problem, right? I mean, why are you here?
Okay, why don't you do us all a favor? Instead of antagonizing the situation, why don't you just leave?
Okay, shucks.
Okay.
You on the streets, right?
From the book Hell's Angels, the flames lit up the street just about the time the National Guard arrived on the scene, with fixed bayonets and rifle butts swinging. The mob scattered, many of them blinded by tear gas bombs. The police were pelted with firecrackers, rocks, and beer cans, but they were wearing helmets, and their 6 weeks of training served them well.
What's that?
The menace is loose again. The Hells Angels, the 100-carat headline, running fast and loud on the freeway, jamming crazy through traffic, and 90 miles an hour down the center stripe, missing by inches, like Genghis Khan on an iron horse. With Sodom 500 miles to the south, in the vast mad bowl of Los Angeles, home turf of the Satan's slaves, with their taste for the flesh of young dogs, and tender young blondes with lobotomy eyes.
The bike rider is Cliff Workman, treasurer of the Hells Angels, the wildest bunch of outlaws to come out of the West since Billy the Kid and the Dalton. He's here to challenge his biographer, a tense young literary journalist named Hunter Thompson. It was Thompson who lived, drank, and rode with the Hells Angels and wrote about them in a bestseller. He was the first to compare them to the outlaws of the West. The critics have been unanimous in their praise of his book, but the Hells Angels haven't been heard from yet. Tonight, Sunday makes author meet critic. It brings together the writer Hunter Thompson and the reader he antagonized the most. That's the bike rider, Hells Angel, Cliff Workman.
What did you think of the book?
Well, I'll tell you, Al and Hunter, everybody in this room, that book is 60% cheap trash.
Cliff, what is a typical Hells Angel?
Typical Hells Angel could be anybody in this room, somebody that likes to ride a motorcycle. I got my own home, I got a job, I got a boat and trailer, you know, I do all things. I raise dogs, I do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, let's face it, you're not a typical angel, and I know that, and you know that, so let's not get ourselves on that.
Boy, they're no different.
Do you think the angel sent Cliff here as an emissary, as a minister plenipotentiary with a high college degree and a yearning for bourgeois respectability? Is he different?
Those are all your words. You can explain them.
Well, you said he's not typical.
No.
You see, actually, there are none of us that care what anybody thinks. Because we are us. I am me. What I do in my home is nobody's business. I don't give a damn. If they don't like me on my motorcycle, it's too bad.
And you say you read the book and you think that I wasn't saying that? No, I know exactly what I said. I spent 2 years in the damn.
Well, I'd like to then get to the end of it then on why.
Well, let's take a point of the fact you're wrong there, right?
You spent a year with us. Why you got your head thumped on?
All right, get to it.
All right, I want to know why we didn't get the 2 kegs of beer that you promised us. Well, this guy here, he's sitting here, he's making $1 million, and he made it off of us. Maybe not quite that much. But
if you knew what I was making on this,
you're making something anyway.
You wouldn't tell me that vitamin credit.
We helped you make it, right?
Yeah.
You said.
Whatever
all we
I'm making,
wanted,
you
there was nothing about money, nothing about a share in the book, nothing about anything. All we wanted was a couple kegs of beer so we could all get drunk. And a copy of the book to each of the Oakland members.
Yeah, I said that.
And when you got your head thumped on, you wrote a letter to Ralph, and you said, "See, and I got beat up and got my head thumped on. I don't owe you guys nothing."
I didn't figure I did. But now, wait a minute.
No, but you didn't tell the people why you got your head thumped on.
Wait a minute. Which 2 kegs of beer are you talking about? What are these?
2 kegs that you were going to give us for... We've had you in our home. We've fed you. We've given you beer. You didn't pay for nothing when you went on those runs.
I don't think you were in my house. A lot of angels have been in
my
my house and drunk a hell of a lot of beer.
Well, sure.
So I think it's fairly well.
And they still like you, but they don't like what you're doing.
Why did they thump him?
All right, this man here, you got into a man's personal argument.
That's a not right lie.
No,
I
it
heard
isn't.
that this afternoon, and go ahead and tell it.
All right, this is my side of what happened.
Okay, you weren't there, so why don't you preface it with that?
This is what happened.
Okay.
And you see if this isn't right. Junkie George was beating his old lady.
Junkie George? Junkie George?
Junkie George.
If you say so.
Now, this is what happened. I'm serious. Junkie George was beating his old lady.
I remember
Junkie's
that.
George,
Right.
Junkie George's dog. Now listen to this. Junkie George's dog bit him, right? To me, this is a personal feud. If a guy wants to beat his wife and his dog bites him, that's between the 3 of them, right? Here came the peacemaker, right? He doesn't have a patch on. He isn't in the club, you know. And Junkie George is stiff. You walked right up to him and you said, "Only a punk beats his wife and dog." These were your words. Now, you said it. You said it to this man. And you backed up.
You finished.
And he said, "Hunter, you want some of this?" And you said no, but you got it anyways. And when he hit you, 3 or 4 others of them hit you too.
Well,
You got in your car and you left. That's when in your book you said you found Magoo asleep in the back of your car, so you stopped and he got out. But the next day, if you'd have had any guts after living with all of these people, you'd have come back up there, had a beer, and sat down with everybody and said, "All right, I made a mistake," or "Somebody made a mistake, so what? Let's have a drink." And we never seen you since.
Well, why don't you?
We never seen our 2 kegs of beer, and we've never seen our book.
You're finished. Are you finished? I was talking to Fripp. It was about 3 in the morning, and we were talking about whether my BSA 650 would run with his chopper, and we were kind of comparing, the ratios and top speeds and roads. And I was watching what's his name, Junkie George. I don't know who. I didn't know the guy, but there was somebody about 30 feet to my left beating his wife to a pulp on the rocks. And I thought, well, that's kind of ugly, but that's the way the game's played in this.
If he'd been beating her that bad, somebody would have stopped her.
Oh no, don't. You're kidding me, and you're going to kid everybody else. No, nobody stopped him, and he beat his wife up. You just said it, right?
He was beating his wife.
Okay,
he wasn't head on the ground with a big rock or something,
No. She was lying on the rocks, and he was giving her this,
To keep a woman in line, you got to beat him like a rug once in a while, That don't mean
he was doing it.
His dog evidently thought it was wrong because his dog bit him. Right?
Well, I wouldn't pay that much attention because I've been.
So he kicked his dog,
Wait a minute now. Let me just get to it.
If it had been me, and I was going to say something, I'd have said, "Go ahead and beat your old lady, but don't kick your dog anymore."
You said that.
I'm sorry, Hunter. We're finished.
Otherwise, I can't
Well, you
can
can
get my own version of it.
I'm afraid you'll have to do it privately.
All right.
Thank you both
all right.
very much for coming.
In 1970, he stood for political office as sheriff of his hometown of Aspen, Colorado. He called himself Freak Power Candidate and was only narrowly defeated.
I think I, unfortunately, proved what I set out to prove. And I think the original reason was to prove it to myself. That the American dream really is and I think that...
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I didn't believe it until now, and I'm not sure that this is really the proof of it. It's very hard to, you know, to have a bald-headed lunatic. I'll do that for the cameras, fellas.
All right!
I've already made up my mind, as a matter of fact. This is my last trip in politics. Or this kind of politics. I assure you I'll be in other kind of politics. I'm not sure which way I'll go, but it'll be one or the other. It won't be down this middle anymore.
If Hunter's political career had come to an abrupt end, he was already famous for the wildly inventive style of his writing.
Editor's note. Due to circumstances beyond our control, the following section was lashed together at the last moment from a 6-pound bundle of documents, notebooks, and recordings. Dr. Thompson's plan, he says, is to create an entirely new form of journalism. In the meantime, we have suspended his monthly retainer and canceled his credit card. During one 4-day period in Washington, he destroyed 2 cars, cracked a wall in the Hilton, purchased 2 French horns at $1,100 each, and ran through a plate glass door in a Turkish restaurant.
Most people are surprised that I walk on 2 legs. And the idea that I would have a wife or a child, or I think I said this, even a mother, that seems to surprise me. I think people think I'm very much maybe a violent version of that comic strip. I am living a normal life. You know, I own a ranch in Colorado, and I have a wife and a child, and peacocks and Dobermans.
Day 2, Owl Farm, Aspen. No sign of Hunter all morning. When he finally appears, we approach him with caution, and he clearly has his doubts about us.
I don't see how you could possibly make a true film. Just because by bringing all this machinery in, you create a situation that's unnatural anyway. It's not you, it's I think one of the problems with film. I don't understand film that well. That's one of the reasons I want to learn about film. I think the technology is not up to the level where we have to get in order to portray reality. The technology warps reality, the portrayal. Film interests me. I'd like to play with it. Nice. Different, eh? Go ahead. Pocket. Beautiful trigger.
Oh!
Beautiful. I mean, you should at least know what the hell handguns are all about.
Frightening, that.
I'm gonna try to get the target too. Let's aim at the dirt over there. Hang on, let me get going. All right.
Oh!
That'll kill a bear at 200 yards.
I won't believe it.
Yeah.
Hunter's violent public image is largely the result of a fictional character he himself created. Hunter called him Raoul Duke, a sort of drug-crazed journalist sent to Las Vegas in search of the American dream. The book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, A Savage Journey to the Heart of the American Dream, was Hunter's vision of an America gone rotten as seen through the eyes of Raoul Duke.
I think it's about time to get into the ether and the cocaine. My attorney was now fumbling with a salt shaker containing the cocaine, opening it, spilling it, then screaming and grabbing at the air as our fine white dust flew up and out across the desert highway. Oh, Jesus, he moaned. Did you see what God just did to us? God didn't do that, I shouted. You did it. You're a narcotics agent. You better be careful, he said. And suddenly he was waving a Black Point .357 Magnum at me, one of those snub-nosed Colt Pythons with a bevel cylinder. Plenty of vultures out here, he said. They'll pick your bones clean before morning.
I've been using Duke for over 10 years, maybe more. I began to use him originally as he was always, he was a vehicle for quotations that nobody else would say. That was me really talking. Those were my quotes.
The only way to prepare for a trip like this was to dress up like human peacocks, get crazy, screech off across the desert and cover the story. But what was the story? Nobody had bothered to say. So we would have to drum it up on our own. Free enterprise, the American dream. Do it now. Pure Gonzo journalism.
I think I've taken that form as far as I can take it. I found that I'm starting to repeat myself anyway. And it's not as much fun anymore. It's hard for me to work on a story now. I become part of the story. First time I went to a press conference with Jimmy Carter, I had to sign more autographs than Carter signed. And the Secret Service had no idea who I was. They thought I was an astronaut. I used to be able to stand in the back, and observe stories and absorb them. I can't do it. Now, the minute I appear at a story, then I become part of it.
If it's take it or leave it, it has to be a rip-off, doesn't it?
We were somewhere around Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, "I feel a bit lightheaded, maybe you should drive." And suddenly, there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping, screeching, and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with the top down to Las Vegas. And a voice was screaming, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamned animals?" Then it was quiet again. My attorney had taken his shirt off and was pouring beer onto his chest to facilitate the tanning process. "What the hell are you yelling about?" he muttered, staring up at the sun with his eyes closed and covered with wraparound Spanish sunglasses. Never mind," I said. "It's your turn to drive." I hit the brakes and aimed the great red shark toward the shoulder of the highway. No point mentioning those bats, I thought. The poor bastard will see them soon enough.
But I'd like to ask you why you use drugs.
Different drugs for different things. Right now, I think it's in my interest, in ours perhaps, maybe the interest of the greater good for me to smoke a joint and calm down. It's been demonstrably proven that temper tantrums are not the best way to do interviews, and probably my life will be easier and yours too if I smoke a joint. Now, if I were to sit here in a fit of anger and you saw me eating acid, if I were you, I'd leave with all the equipment. That cranks it up even worse.
The important thing in Hunter's life actually is seeing that great country, that amazing sort of rolling place, go down the drain. The drugs play a part in it. It's only another way of twisting the mental image, if you like. I don't know. Maybe he actually needed something maybe to speed himself up to keep it going. In a way, it's a kind of a dedication, just in order to see what he wants to see.
What are we marking?
I'm 6 o'clock.
Oh, no, God. Help us, Jesus. Why does this happen at the end? Oh.
I think going to Las Vegas is going to be a rather strange feeling for him because he's going to feel a little apprehensive about going back to something that perhaps he might want to forget. Las Vegas does represent about the ultimate in what you can do if you've got endless amounts of money or if you haven't and you can go there and win it. It's the sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Strange memories on this nervous night in Las Vegas. 5 years later? 6? It seems like a lifetime, or at least a main era. The kind of peak that never comes again. History is hard to know because of all the hired bullshit. But even without being sure of history, it seems entirely reasonable to think that every now and then, the energy of an entire generation comes to a head in a long, fine flash, for reasons that nobody really understands at the time, and which never explain in retrospect what actually happened. You could strike sparks anywhere. There was a fantastic universal sense that whatever we were doing was right, that we were winning. We had all the momentum. We were riding the crest of a high and beautiful wave. So now, less than 5 years later, you can go up on a steep hill in Las Vegas and look west. And with the right kind of eyes, you can almost see the high water mark. That place where the wave finally broke and rode back.
From the article, Fear and Loathing at the Watergate.
Richard M. Nixon, ace track star for Whittier College, held his first press conference today since gangrene had forced doctors to amputate his leg some 5 weeks ago. Expectedly, the first question to Mr. Nixon was, would the loss of a leg in any way impair him from breaking the 3-minute mile as he has claimed he would 4 years ago? In answer to your question, let me say this. Sure, it's tough. The fact that I have only one leg has made it tough on us all. Believe me, no one knows better than me just how hard it has been. But I was elected to this team to break the world record for the 3-minute mile. And this constant obsession of the press with this missing leg business has prevented me from pushing forward with my program. But you've only got one leg, screams Don Rather of CBS. I know that. But let me say this to you.
What's the matter? What is the matter with you? Come on. Open the door.
Day 3, Las Vegas, 12 o'clock noon. We should have left for Hollywood at 9, but Thompson has locked himself in his hotel room. When he finally lets us in, his face is covered in white makeup.
Are you sure you're going to be okay?
I don't know.
Hey, you look terrible. Hey, sit down, something, and anything, but just please.
I'm on the phone.
Oh, yeah? Oh. You might, you're actually well enough to do that. Well, that's good.
Yes.
Can you,
I've been vomiting blood this morning. What? Home. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can speak to Ralph for a second here. Yeah. Tell Cindy just exactly what's been happening.
Just, well, playing around, but it's obviously not. He's just...
I don't recognize anyone anymore.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
But I was in no mood or condition to spend another week in Las Vegas. Not now.
Yeah, no, not
I had pushed my luck about as far as it was going to carry me in this town. All the way out to the edge. And now the weasels were closing in. I could smell the ugly brutes. Yes, it was definitely time to leave. My margin had shrunk to nothing.
Shit, just disappearing. Caught back there. Cops behind us anywhere?
No.
The guy behind me is looking at me in a very ugly way.
I feel that, this idea of possibly going to Hollywood, another dream factory, where you can do anything and die on film, and by so doing, possibly have reincarnation, would fascinate Hunter very much, because it's an outrageous idea to go and arrange your own burial.
What do you think of this place, Hunter? It's the place to get out of as fast as possible.
You realize that your movie's going to open here?
I won't be here for it.
But your name's going to be on it.
Well, if I don't have to see it, it'll be all right. I hope it makes money, but I know what, hey, we're drawing a crowd again. God.
Why are you hiding here?
Look at this, you've drawn a crowd. That's why I'm hiding. Everywhere you go, you draw a crowd with this thing.
Do you know any of the names of these?
I haven't seen a name. I don't want to see any names. It looks to me like a dirty sidewalk. I'd like to get out of here.
Popcorn.
No, thank you. I hate popcorn. You just said to figure out what you're going to do. I refuse to go out there in this thing until you know what you're doing.
I just want you to... It seems to me that this is sort of the heartland of Hollywood.
That's why I've avoided it for 50 years.
But this is... It seems to me this is a really appropriate place.
We're drawing a crowd. It's like India. If I sit down here, God damn it, I'll be out of here in 13 more seconds if this keeps up. You may as well go to Bangladesh. Look at this. We've drawn a crowd for nothing at all. Aim at somebody else, Philip.
The 37th President of the United States, Honorable Richard M. Nixon.
Hunter's nightmare of a revitalized Nixon coming back into public life is confirmed by a network news item. Nixon comes out of retirement in San Clemente to open a sports center named after him in Kentucky. The standing ovation he receives from an uncritical public confirms Hunter's worst fears that the lessons of Watergate have already been forgotten. Acting in the spirit of Gonzo, he decides to launch the Re-elect Nixon in 1980 campaign with the idea of provoking some kind of public reaction. He calls in two friends, both actors, to help stage the inaugural rally.
This man got a raw deal. This guy got a raw deal. Tonight we're going to ask him to pardon us.
Ask Nixon to pardon us. Ask Nixon to pardon us. Ask Nixon to pardon us.
Ask Nixon to pardon us. Ask Nixon to pardon us. Now more than ever.
The meeting in Beverly Hills isn't a runaway success. There's a total attendance of 3.
Different years.
4 other years.
You don't forgive Richard Nixon?
When I came here, I'll be honest, I didn't forgive him.
And why have you changed your mind?
Your speech, the excitement tonight, everything surrounding my mind is being changed tonight.
I think we're having an impact. Come on, we're having some impact here.
But do you feel one guy shooting it in the right direction against something as big as Nixon, as big as the state, can actually achieve anything?
I think so. I think so, but I have to think so. You know, that's... If I didn't think so, I'd be dumb. You know, I'd have to look at myself in the mirror and think, wait a minute, if this is all totally useless, then why are you doing it? I could get rich. There are a lot of things I could do. I was a good criminal at one point, and probably still am in some way. But no, I have to think that a person can do something good, but I'm not sure how you'd... Maybe I might be just doing myself good in some way, I don't know.
The third president, Thomas Jefferson, had a vision of America. He believed that this whole new country, this giant unformed continent, offered the chance to start again. The premise was very simple, that human beings acting in a sense of enlightened self-interest are smart enough to do the right thing and know the truth. America could have been a fantastic monument to all the best instincts of the human race. Instead, we just moved in here and destroyed the place from coast to coast like killer snails. Everybody wants power over a country that has had its day. I think we're finished.
The final day in Hollywood, and our final attempt to uncover the real Hunter Thompson.
If you're going to be a famous American writer, you don't really think of being in the comic strips, you know, being... Oh yeah, or doing things like that, yes, in front of the camera, and it will be on film, won't it? The way the water is without chlorophyll, and the whiskey kills what would be the chlorophyll substitute. So every time we make a drink here, we put the drink in the ice, and then the whole thing into the grass, giving the ice enough time to absorb the chlorophyll. I have now absorbed enough chlorophyll to get back to the drink. That's why I'm so healthy, folks. I always roll my ice in chlorophyll before I drink whiskey. All right, what were you saying?
I was asking you whether there's this pressure to live up to the image that you've created.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, you've been putting it on me all week. Like, how much pressure do you think? How would you define pressure? Being taken to Las Vegas and put in front of cameras, and yeah, I mean, I'm not sure at all if you're what you think you're shooting. Whether whether this thing, excuse me, every once in a while I forget who I'm talking to. But I have no idea whether you think you're taking or making a film about Duke or Thompson. I haven't thought about it until now. And I'm filling with hate and rage right now just thinking about it. Go ahead. That's you.
You passing it over to me again?
Well, I mean, I want to drink some chlorophyll.
So what?
Oh, no, I think that's a serious point. I'm never sure which one people expect me to be. And very often, they conflict. Most often, as a matter of fact, with people I don't know, I'm expected to be Duke more than Thompson.
Just as Hunter Thompson intuited the last days of the 60s as the end of the beginning, something about the late 70s must have felt like the beginning of the end. And Hunter Thompson had always been a movie waiting to happen. Released in 1980, Where the Buffalo Roam appropriates the life of one Hunter S. Thompson, from the campaign trail to the Super Bowl. Hunter's hottest property at this point was himself. Hunter S. Thompson contained multitudes, and Bill Murray caught a lot of them. Whatever its drawbacks, the film established Hunter as a bona fide pop culture icon, an action figure for the underground.
I think I better tell my readers right now that I'm no longer responsible for anything that I write from this point on.
He built a reputation so that even people who didn't necessarily read him knew about him.
In 1976, Hunter Thompson wrote an essay about Oscar Zeta Acosta, which was optioned by Universal under Tom Mount, and that became Where the Buffalo Roam.
The film really was the building of the foundation of the cult around Hunter Thompson.
I'll just lash together a few raw facts. A little bit of old Negro wisdom. This nightmare is over.
He just captured whatever was going on in the 70s, you know, I mean, whatever was going on, he had that kind of thing that he was the voice of it. I mean, it was part Bozo the Clown, part philosopher, part, you know, he was armed, he was drugged. It was like, how could you not make a movie about that? Bill Murray inhaled Hunter Thompson in his research and the way he did. He literally inhaled him like Hunter inhaled an 8-ball. I mean, it was, he became this guy. And I'm not sure the movie ever lives up to what Billy did, but what Billy did was a phenomenal recreation. I mean, it's as if Hunter got inside of Billy like some sick, incurable disease.
Kid! Somebody stole my wallet!
He did a wonderful job in Where the Buffalo Roam of really capturing Hunter, and he also spent time with Hunter and followed him around and soaked him up and came back with this great portrayal.
He really did believe in the way you treat your fellow human is the way that you're going to get it back, you know. And the people that don't do it have to be told.
The key aspects are all right there in the Fourth Amendment. Great. Fourth Amendment. A basis in reality. That's good. Including the need for probable cause. Probable cause? Yeah. All right. And the right for people to be secure in their home, free from illegal search and seizure. I mean, that's it. You know, that's the big one. The fucking Constitution.
One of the things about Where the Buffalo Roam that makes it valuable is that it's a time capsule. This is how Hunter Thompson looked on an April morning in 1980, because this is how you try and explain him to your parents. This is how you try and explain him to a mass audience, because he was still pretty much a cult figure at that point.
Come on, Bronco. We're celebrating. Come on, the story is finished, man. Don't get weird on me now.
I think in looking back on it, it's a nice little moment of capturing the late 70s in terms of a wacky look at what we were looking at 30 years ago, at this guy who was real and vital at the time, and trying to put him in some sort of cinematic context.
When you have to make something that's going to last a long time, you have an extraordinary obligation to be at your best.
Hot damn. So much for the facts.
I remember thinking that Bill Murray was brilliant as Hunter. Way before I'd ever met Hunter, you know, I just thought Bill did a great job. genius.
As the 1980s staggered into the 1990s, actors as a species were increasingly drawn to Hunter S. Thompson, a true friend and the rawest of material. One of them was Johnny Depp. The two shared more than just Kentucky roots. They became partners in crime and cinema. Disappearing into Hunter on film was both an honor and a threat. Johnny rose to that challenge by taking that chance. So in 1998, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas finally made it to the big screen. It would have been easy to drown in the undertow of the wave Hunter had so famously written into life. But they tried like hell to get it right.
The first time we met, it was like the first thing we connected on. It was like, you know, a brother from, you know, from the same soil. That was our initial buzz, you know.
Suddenly, there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car. And a voice was screaming, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals?"
He had a romance for the sense of the open road. I mean, the romance for Hunter was a convertible and a pipe full of marijuana and a bottle of Kentucky whiskey, and you drive off with the top down into the great American sunset.
One thing about the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is that it does kind of represent Hunter's life in a way. I mean, he really was on the move constantly. You see that in the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the constant action, and you can kind of get a sense of what it would be like to be Hunter Thompson.
In the case of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he's trying to go out to the heart of the American dream. He's actually trying to penetrate the heart of the American dream at a moment in present time.
Who are these people? These faces? Where do they come from? They look like caricatures of used car dealers from Dallas. And sweet Jesus, there are a hell of a lot of them at 4:30 on a Sunday morning. Still humping the American dream.
Johnny told me, see, before they made that, he was living in Hunter's basement. I think he got Hunter down, you know, pretty good. I know they were really close.
I was living in his basement, so I was his partner in crime. As his partner in crime, you became this surrogate, Dr. Gonzo. It was a magical time.
I think that that's the mysticism of acting. You know, you seek to become more than you are. Hunter Thompson, as in the role that he created on paper, I think holds that invitation out to a lot of actors, and I think to Depp in particular.
I had all that time with Hunter. It made it all the more easy to become him.
Our trip was different. It was to be a classic affirmation of everything right and true in the national character. A gross physical salute to the fantastic possibilities of life in this country, but only for those with true grit. And we are chock full of that, man.
I got a phone call from Bill, and I said, "What's going on? What's the matter?" And he said, "Nothing, I just wanted to talk to you, because I understand you're going to play Hunter. If you're going to play Hunter, and he seeps into your skin, you will always find yourself becoming him at one time or another for the rest of your life, probably."
Why not? I mean, if the thing's worth doing right.
If you're a writer and you're seeing your book being made into a movie, you might have some issues that you may not even be able to explain. But what he loved about the movie was Johnny.
Johnny got him really good in the movement of him.
Those of us who had been up all night were in no mood for coffee and donuts. We wanted strong drink.
The more time I spent with Hunter, the more I appreciated what Johnny did in that movie.
We were, after all, the absolute cream of the national sporting press.
One of Depp's great gifts as an actor, it's the thing that he can trade on, is the fact that he seems kind of ageless. And that spirit that's in him is very akin to Hunter Thompson.
I think what Benicio brought to the film is something that Hunter knew as Oscar Zeta Acosta, the Brown Buffalo. He spoke about him as one of the most, you know, loving, sweet, sensitive, smart, funny, but dangerous. One of the most dangerous individuals he'd ever known. So I believe that's what Benicio brought beautifully to the role.
My other favorite moment comes late in the film, you know, which is when he's saying goodbye to Dr. Gonzo. Dr. Gonzo's running up into the airplane, and he says,
"There he goes, one of God's own prototypes.
A high-powered mutant of some kind, not even considered for mass production.
Too weird to live, and too rare to die."
A good portion of these critics, you know, were freaked out by the film, you know. I mean, some people walked out feeling, you know, like high, you know, like too high.
I remember saying something like, I feel a bit lightheaded. Yeah, you should drive.
It was one of these rare movies where the drug stuff seemed to be real. The drug and the booze stuff seemed to be real.
Get in.
I remember Johnny walking sideways, you know, going into the casino.
Oh, devil ether. It makes you behave like the village drunkard in some early Irish novel. Total loss of all basic motor skills. Blurred vision, no balance, numb tongue. The mind recoils in horror, unable to communicate with the spinal column. Which is interesting because you can actually watch yourself behaving in this terrible way, but you can't control it.
And buying the monkey, trying to buy the monkey, and things like that.
Listen, let's get down to brass tacks here. How much for the ape?
What'd you think of the movie? About you?
That's funny. Johnny Depp asked me that question last night on the telephone.
I called him and I said, well, what do you know, do you hate me? And he said, oh, no, man. He said, Jesus Christ. These words just flew out of his mouth. He said, no, man, it was like an eerie trumpet call over a lost battlefield. It really was less of a job than it was a love letter, you know, or a salute.
Hunter gloried in excess and lived for it. The depth of his appetite is legendary, and the word more remains his byword. Who knows what he was feeding? His work, his play, his talent, his addictions, his lust for life. And that life was lit night for day, around a table in the kitchen and over a phone. Hunter liked to keep in close touch and just out of reach. Woody Creek became the center for the maze. For Hunter, the world might be getting a little less interesting all the time, but it was more interested in him than ever. And there was always the business of having to be Hunter S. Thompson, a real man inside a booming franchise, the same concerned owner and operator for, lo, these many years.
His was a life of excess, and you name the area, and he was excessive in the way he participated in that area.
How long had I been lying there? All these signs of violence. What had happened?
Anybody who could consume as much as he did is eo ipso phenomenal.
There was evidence in this room of excessive consumption of almost every type of drug known to civilized man since 1544 AD.
The day always started for Hunter, usually in the afternoon, which started breakfast.
It's a sad state of affairs when this reporter has to go heavily armed to breakfast.
And what a breakfast it is. Still alive, still kicking.
6 half grapefruits, 4 Bloody Marys, a couple of tequilas, pack of cigarettes, and, two pitchers of coffee.
Could I have another round, please?
Of cocktails?
Everything. Cocktails, food, Super Sunday. You got to store up as much energy as you can a day like this.
I start with Chivas and water on the rocks, orange juice, grapefruit juice, coffee. That was it. That was a beautiful spread for him.
He'd order 3 or 4 entrees and eat one of them and maybe eat half of another and say, can you box those up and I'll take them home.
And that would be in the side what he had for every day for years. Fruit. It's all fresh fruit, berries, apples, bananas, covered with a layer of Jell-O and gin.
It was not unusual for him to order most of the things on the menu.
Hmm?
He ordered 4 margaritas and 6 bottles of beer.
I think if he had actually consumed all the stuff he claimed to consume and done the things he did, he would have killed himself when he was in his 20s.
Yeah, I'm an addict. I have an addictive personality.
And this waitress kind of looked nervously and giggled a little, and she said, "Sir, are you expecting some other people? I can get you a larger table." He says, "Well, I don't want a larger table. I want 6 beers and 4 margaritas. You speak English?"
Ultimately, of course, Hunter Thompson couldn't satisfy his appetite, such as there was, for life.
But what the hell? You can't win them all.
Hunter spent most of his time on the phone, processing, planning, debating, debating with friends on the phone.
The curse of Wano, you came out to cover the Honolulu Marathon when Nike...
Okay.
Did something go through the window?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
And he kept the hours of a vampire bat. He'd get up around 6 p.m. and go to bed when the sun came up, and he trained his clientele to pick up the phone at 4 in the morning in New York City and not to call him at noon because they weren't going to get through.
The bulk of the friendship always happens between, 12 o'clock at night and dawn on the phone.
I miss talking to him late at night. Getting that phone call at 4 o'clock. I think someone, I don't know who it was, but someone said, now I know if that phone call comes at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be bad news.
Any call I got between 12 and 6 was either Hunter or bad news. Sometimes both. Sometimes Hunter with bad news.
And now when my phone rings at 4 in the morning, it always used to be Hunter. Now I think it's a tragedy, because no one calls me at 4 in the morning unless it's a tragedy. And I wish I had kept all of those recordings, because sometimes I wouldn't answer the phone, and Hunter would go on for 15 minutes.
Whenever one got stuck on something, whether it was dealing with current politics or something creative that you were up to, whatever it is, I could always just go on speakerphone with a drink in my hand and call up Woody Creek. And whatever it was that came out of a conversation with Hunter, there was something better that would come out of me on the next go around when I was by myself. It was he was a shot in the arm like no other.
Man, it was hard for me to concentrate. That's all I can say.
Hey, drugs are no excuse, John. You know that? I've told you that a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
And I pick up the phone and he goes, "What if I just beat the fuck out of you right now? Huh? What if I just beat the fuck out of you right now?" And I go, "Hunter, what the fuck?" Right? And he goes, "Well, that's what you told me the first time I met you, right? Well, what if I beat the fuck out of you right now? Oh, by the way, I just got married."
I think it's important for people to know that even weeks prior to Hunter shooting himself, he was calling Ralph and they were talking about new projects down the road and things Hunter wanted Ralph to work on with him.
Ralph, you filthy little animal. You dirty little beast. Hi, Ralph, it's Hunter. And I have a job for you. This one's going to be for you. I know, don't say it. I'm a little high, Ralph. I've been writing many weird pages on this article for Jan, which is due on Friday. This coming Friday. That's my deadline. Who else but you would I turn to when we want to kick ass? So give me a ring. Thank you.
Next, saved message.
Ralph, something's wrong with my head. I'm seeing golf balls and little green men and yellow raincoats right outside my door and calling my name. All right, let's try to coordinate ourselves here. Yeah, get this fucking thing done in a big way. We're gonna have to make a serious splash with this. And I'm not sure the pig fucking thing is the best. I'm not sure myself. God damn, I wish I could go out and kill some animals. It's almost dawn here, and the first ray of the sun coming over the mountains, I will be out killing things, whatever I can find. So, thank you very much. Good night.
The difference between the public hunter and the private hunter is that Hunter, in his heart and at home and with his friends privately was a supreme Southern gentleman.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, yeah. I like Chief Comforts, mate. Calms me down.
I don't know if that always gets out into his persona in the public, like the Raoul Duke and the Hunter Thompson show.
Oh, I was hunted down on election night by the cops, where I was leading the movement to take on the Aspen Ski Company, and we beat them. They were trying to expand the airport runway. Beat them, but on election morning, on the way home, I was arrested, and they've had me on trial ever since. Imagine being pulled over and blowing a .053.
What's legal? What's illegal?
.10 is DUI.
So you're halfway there.
.053 is the difference between me drinking this and not drinking it. You know, whatever that is.
So how are they making that stick?
They're not.
John Cusack.
Well, this is the letter. And when I was arrested, it was last year. It was a bungling, a vicious arrest, political arrest. They were trying to blast me on election night, which they did, but they were about 3 hours late when we won the election the next day. I beat the ski company by a huge margin. I'm a great believer in local politics. So when I was arrested for the same reason, I wrote this letter to the district attorney, and I used, thank you. Yeah. And I offered as help. It's called How to Deal with the Police.
Dear Mr. Willis.
Letter.
Dear Mr. Willis, I'm given to understand that you want me to come into the courthouse and officially surrender to you in front of witnesses so that you can formally rearrest me on some kind of vague chicken shit charge cooked up by Officer Short on the night of November 7th, 8th, 1995, in the course of our bizarre encounter on Cemetery Lane, as I was very skillfully driving home on an utterly deserted road after delivering the keynote address at a major political rally full of people who planned to wake up the next morning, Election Day, and kick the shit out of the Aspen Ski Commission. Is my information correct? Did that vengeful dingbat actually fail to serve me with a valid legal summons? Did he botch everything that night? Was he so crazy that he couldn't even arrest me properly? And is that why you want me to drive at top speed into town so you can get your picture in the papers while you slap handcuffs on me and swell up like a toad for the cameras? Lawson, have you no shame? Are you a Nazi? Are you nuts with lust for your upcoming 15 minutes of fame? Has it come to this, that you have to beg, bitch, and cajole your victims to turn themselves in and abandon all hope for everything except humiliation and jail? How long, oh Lord, how long?
The pitfall that any notoriously popular and notoriously well-known artist is beginning to believe your own myth.
He became a prisoner of his own cult, I think, that evolved out of almost accident. I don't think he realized it was going to take off quite the way it did, or that he would then have to maintain that status.
Here's his daily routine. 3 p.m., rise. 3:05, Chivas Regal with morning papers. Smokes Dunhills. 3:45, cocaine. 3:50, another glass of Chivas. Another Dunhill. 4:05 p.m., by the way, first cup of coffee and a Dunhill. 4:15, cocaine. 4:16, orange juice and another Dunhill. 4:30, cocaine. 4:54, cocaine. 5:05, cocaine. 5:11, coffee, Dunhills. 5:30, get more ice in the Chivas. Cocaine at 5:45. 6 o'clock, smoking grass to take the edge off the day. 7 p.m.
The day, 3 hours into it.
3 hours in, lit. 7:05, Woody Creek Tavern for lunch. Heineken, 2 margaritas, coleslaw, a taco salad, double order of fried onion rings, carrot cake, ice cream, a bean fritter, Dunhills, another Heineken, cocaine. And for the rest of the ride home, a snow cone, a glass of shredded ice, which is poured over 4 jiggers of Chivas. Okay, so the snow cone is Chivas. Okay, 9 p.m., start snorting cocaine seriously, it says. 10 p.m., drops acid. 11 p.m., chartreuse, I don't know what that is, cocaine and grass. 11:30, cocaine, etc., etc. 12, midnight, Hunter S. Thompson is ready to write.
Wow.
That's when he sits down to write. 12:05 to 6 a.m., he writes. chartreuse, cocaine, grass, chivas, coffee, Heineken, clove cigarettes, grapefruit, Dunhills, orange juice, gin, continuous pornographic movies. 6 a.m. in the hot tub with champagne, Dove bars, fettuccine Alfredo. 8 a.m. Halcyon, which is a sleeping pill. 8:20, sleep. So he would take a sleeping pill at 8:20 in the morning after riding it hard.
What I love is that most people, it's about, if I get this work done, then I can have a drink.
Nope.
With him, it's the opposite.
Yeah, he
actually
wild,
did the work.
Yeah, he got wild to the core where there was nothing left but just savage chemicals flowing through the brilliant core of his mind. And then he just sat in front of that typewriter and let it rip for 6 hours.
Just focused it onto the, yeah. Wow.
I love it.
Wow, that's
but you
insane.
You can't do that for long. It doesn't last.
He was trapped by a mythology he created. I think you would probably admit that.
People had certain expectations of him, I'm sure. And that must have been very difficult. That must be very difficult to have to live up or live down to what people think you're going to be.
In my case, you know, I hate to advocate drugs or liquor, violence, insanity to anyone. But in my case, it's worked.
It's possible that the compulsion to be Hunter Thompson in every situation backed him into a bit of a corner.
He just had to live up to this goddamn caricature, really, that he'd made for himself. And to live up to that caricature became the strain that I think started to lose its fun.
The wild, crazy man, drug addict, this was what people bought. This is what people wanted. This is not what Hunter wanted when he was younger. This was not who he wanted to become.
On the 20th of February, 2005, Hunter S. Thompson killed himself. Everybody has his reasons. Being Hunter, he left a note. It stands on the page like a poem, and it reads, "Football season is over. No more games. No more bombs. No more walking. No more fun. No more swimming. 67. That is 17 years past 50. 17 more than I needed or wanted. Boring. I'm always bitchy. No fun for anybody. 67. You are getting greedy. Act your old age. Relax. This won't hurt."
Hunter S. Thompson was a lot of things: a journalist, an author, a patriot, a professional troublemaker, a complex walking monument to misbehavior, who apparently took his own life with a gun last night. There were so many drugs, so much booze, so much raw talent. It was hard to tell his fiction from nonfiction. It's still hard to tell what Hunter S. Thompson was exactly.
Stole my wallet!
2 different Hollywood films tried, but the big screen in the end was too small to contain him. And yet he insisted it was never about him.
The journalist. You guys are the actors. I'm going back to my original role. Back to my roots.
Of course, it was all about him and his invention, a mixture of outrage and overstatement called Gonzo journalism. It reached its peak with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and on the campaign trail. Hunter Thompson was the national affairs desk at Rolling Stone, and later the inspiration for a Doonesbury character. Among his many passions, guns, all the better when fired in a bathrobe, in the snow, at his Colorado outpost, where he died last night.
It was like, yeah, something had been somebody just removed something from your body, you know? That's what it felt like.
Hunter
more than most people lived on his own terms. And he was going to do his death on his own terms, too.
I respected the fact that he was incapacitated, but I could see how demoralized he was. And I think he put the physical demoralization and debilitation together with the lack of creative juices and energy. And he just said, now's the time.
To try to imagine Hunter Thompson, fighting for every last breath in a hospital bed, hooked up to all sorts of tubes, that's just not him.
Sometimes he'd get up in the middle of the night and fire his shotgun off into the night. I thought he'd do something like that. I never thought he'd turn that gun on himself.
He was going to go out when he was ready to go, the way he wanted to go, and he wasn't going to let anybody else decide that for him.
The first instinct was to romanticize the exit. It wasn't completely a heroic ending for Hunter. But on the same token, no one ever told Hunter what he was going to do or how he was going to do it.
By the code by which he lived, which included Hemingway's code, there is a moment when you ask what's next, and you ask it with totality, and you reach a fullness where you just have to go.
One thing we can never do is completely get inside another person's head. Who knows what Hemingway was thinking of? Who knows exactly what Hunter was thinking of?
I knew that he'd had some back pains and some illness and so on, but I thought Hunter was a true lover of life. And I always thought that no matter what his health situation was or what problems he was going through, that somehow he'd hang on.
At 67 years old, he had lived a very hard life. He drank regularly since he was about 10 or 11 years old. And as somebody who had things like knee problems and hip replacement and had a number of medical ailments, and he did everything he kind of wanted to do.
Hunter could have had a responsible vision of saying, I've done my work here, and I know it's so good where I'm going, I'm on my way.
Now that he's gone, and he's been gone for a year, most of us that were close to him really feel the void. It's not as much fun, and it's not as interesting a world without Hunter.
The whole point of Hunter was, as a messenger to us, was to take control of your own life. Don't be at the beck and call of an institution or let people tell you what to do. Freedom is about personal freedom, and you have the right to live and you have the right to die, and he wanted to die in the fashion that he did.
Hunter Thompson never acted his age his whole life. He was born old, and he remains forever young. Buy the ticket, he once counseled. Take the ride. But the ticket costs more all the time, and the ride gets a little slower, a little shorter every year. As giddy as Huck Finn at his own funeral, Hunter had been planning his memorial service for more than 30 years. Like his life, his death had to be this elaborate work in progress.
When I got the news that Hunter had made his exit, I remember thinking almost immediately, the cannon.
Well, it seems we're here today to discuss some kind of idea for a monument.
Why?
I think we want to get an estimate and that sort of thing. What sort of thing would cost? If I show you this is a basic idea. But actually, Hunter hasn't approved it yet. It's just a thought. Yeah, let me over. He lives in Aspen, in Colorado.
That is different.
Well, that's like a giant eagle's bird bath, in a way. That kind of thing.
We also want to look at, as the fact that this rim of mountains is a giant valley 20 miles across.
Is this property that you own now?
Yeah. You see the top of the red cliffs back there? The edge of the property goes back over the cliffs. I can do whatever. If I wanted to build a McDonald's, I could do it back there.
Hunter prefers a little simpler, maybe even like this, but not with wings. But, with the fist on top, but more of a Teutonic.
What I'm trying to do is get some estimate as the cost of this thing and whether it's feasible or not.
I did this merely to give Hunter something to bounce off and say no or something. Albert Speer?
No, simplicity.
Albert Speer, the kind of the architect.
Yeah, Albert Speer sort of.
Yeah, I've heard him, but I said I know him.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a pile of rocks about 100 feet tall
and then a giant chrome sort of a cylinder, more like in a conical sort of round and tapering down to the top at 150 feet tall, hollow inside, with on top of the sort of big arm would be a fist with a double thumb, you know, the symbol.
I told you 1,000 times for 10 years, you've got to put 2 thumbs in the fist.
You put the other thumb. Come on.
I'll put it on there because it's going to be on there in the end.
A twisted thumb.
Well, I mean, it's better than no thumb, which is what you had. I can't count on my friends, you see.
No, that's the problem.
I've all my life I've made irresponsible. Is this something that you would want to do in the near future? It's written, well, I'm not sure.
I mean, you're talking about something that maybe you want to do after you die, is what you're saying.
Oh, yes, it's in the will. You know, it's all described. It's going to be a little hard to do, particularly with me gone. But I think it'd be a nice monument. After the cremation, we put the ashes in a canister and shoot it out the top of the fist over the valley, and up, gets up about, say, 500 feet up, it explodes, and the ashes drift down all over here. And that's it. That's my funeral.
That I do know about. We place ashes in different areas.
Do you actually spread it over the 7 seasons?
Yes, we do quite a bit of that.
Oh, you do that too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we fly them out in an airplane. I happen to be a pilot, and we sometimes we have the families meet in a particular place, and we'll fly over and circle, and then fly out to sea.
I'm a firm believer in the ashes to ashes and dust to dust concept.
What you do is basically for those that are still living, in a sense. Have you thought about it in that way?
That's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying to take it seriously.
Otherwise, people that are related to you, your wife and whoever, is sometimes whatever is done when someone dies. And maybe that should be taken in consideration, and probably it already has when you're thinking about what you want to do.
I'm just starting to get serious. Doctors, again, give me like 6 months to live at swine, so this is every 2 years the doctor tells me I'm going to die. For all I know, I might somehow live for 10 more years.
Well, that's something none of us know how long we're going to live.
No, I provided for no ceremony except for one song. That's Mr. Tambourine Man.
He'd spoken about it when I first went to Owl Farm in 1972. For the first time, he'd said, I'd feel real trapped in this life right now if I didn't know that I could commit suicide at any moment.
And we had spoken about it, over the years, he brought it up, every now and again, oh yeah, I gotta have I need the cannon, that's how I gotta go. I know somewhere in his crooked mind, I know that he knew that I was the only one, perhaps loyal enough, perhaps insane enough to attempt it.